there is an inherent dichotomy, an innate contradiction in psychology and in self-help literature. On the one hand, we are told that we should expand our horizons, we should explore our potentials, we should be spontaneous and in many ways unbridled. We should strive to kind of experiment, to try things, to step out of our comfort zone, to be ourselves by becoming different at different times, in different settings and circumstances and environments, to interact with other people and establish interpersonal relationships in order to enrich ourselves and introduce new things into our lives. All this is a growth strategy. It's about having a life plan. It's about expanding. It's about subsuming. It's about integrating the environment and other people into our lives. So this is message number one. And then there's message number two. Don't do certain things. Certain things are wrong. If you do certain things, if you act in certain ways, you're evil. You're misguided in the best case. And so there is an emphasis on inhibitions, on boundaries, on self-limitation, self-control, self-discipline. So which is it? Should we expand like in the Big Bang or like a supernova? Or should we constrict ourselves into some kind of neutron star, a black hole, a red dwarf? Enough with the cosmological metaphors. You get my meaning. One message is expand, consume, subsume, explore, discover, experiment, be adventurous, be spontaneous. The other message is stay at home, limit yourself, discipline yourself, control yourself, and don't do wrong, only good. That's the voice of the conscience. And these conflicting messages do not go well together. They create dissonance. They create anxiety, especially in modern and postmodern societies, where moral codes and social norms and conventions and mores have all but evaporated and disintegrated. There are no rigid scripts. You're not told what to do. You have to discover it for yourself. You have to reinvent yourself. You have to negotiate every relationship separately, time and again. There are no rigid codices. There are no rigid codes of how to do things and how to be with other people. And so in this fluid environment, which creates a lot of uncertainty and indeterminacy and anxiety, in this fluid environment, not only are we told that we should be all over the place, but at the same time we are told that we should be nowhere, that we should constrict. This is the topic I want to explore today in the context of pathological narcissism. My name is Sam Vaknin. I'm the author of Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited, and I'm a professor of psychology, this benighted subject, discipline. Adulthood, maturity are about life constriction and behavioral constriction. We are told that to be an adult, to grow up, to attain milestones of maturity, all these require inhibitions, constraints on behavior, boundaries, learning from experience what to avoid, what to not do, adhering to norms and conventions and mores which are inculcated and internalized in us as the voice of conscience or an artifact of socialization. And all this, of course, as I said, creates a lot of anxieties because our natural tendency is to be, to exist, to experiment, to go through the adventure of life with joy and cheer. And this is frowned upon by society. because society is terrified of losing control. Social control is a major feature, especially of modern societies, but, major feature of human history. And societies, organized societies, especially the elites, they are petrified at the idea that one might become Big Lebowski, a slacker. They are petrified at the idea that their values, or the values they're trying to impose on the masses, are not going to work. The people are going to give up on money, career, and that they are going to simply be. And so these are the dual messages. Grow up by exploring and becoming yourself, and grow up by limiting yourself, inhibiting yourself, disciplining yourself, and controlling yourself, and avoiding a panoply of possible actions, decisions, choices, and behaviors. And of course, this conflict, this inherent contradiction, they are most pronounced in pathological narcissism. You see, reality, including social reality, is about constriction. It's about limitation. It's about control. It's about manipulation. It's about behavior modification. That's what reality is all about. Reality pushes back. Reality is harsh, uncompromising, impersonal, and very often random. Reality is not considerate. Reality doesn't take one's needs and wishes and hopes and dreams and fantasies into account. Reality is just there. A reality cannot be negotiated with. It can be, of course, modified, mitigated, ameliorated, reconstructed, changed, impacted upon. It can be subject, it can be kind of raw material, subject to one's will and action. But that's in the fringes. That is a veneer, because the core of reality, the nucleus of reality, is untouchable, immutable, non-malleable, impermeable, invulnerable. And so when one is confronted with reality, one is confronted with one's own limits, with one's own inadequacies, with one's own minimization, with one's own, to some extent, self-negation. One is confronted with one's finiteness, with the fact that one's power is very constrained, that one's knowledge is highly partial and biased. These are the messages from reality that emanate from reality and shape all of us. And these are exactly the messages that the narcissist rejects vehemently, vociferously, violently, aggressively, and abusively. The narcissist refuses to accept that he or she is limited in any sense. Social reality, which is a part of reality, larger reality, social reality, constricts. Social reality informs the individual. This is where you stop. This is where the world begins. And the narcissist rejects reality because it challenges and undermines his infinitely inflated, counterfactual, unreal and unrealistic, fantastic self-concept. Reality is the narcissist's greatest enemy, and he chooses to renounce it at every turn by opting for fantasy, by collaborating with others in creating, in engendering, and in propagating, and in imposing fantasies. Fantasy is a refuge and sanctuary of the narcissist. Narcissism is escapism. But there's a problem with this solution. And the problem is that reality intrudes. Reality insists on being known, being noticed. Reality is inexorable. And reality is a bit like water. It permeates every nook and cranny and crack. There's no way to prevent water from being everywhere. And there's no way of preventing reality from imposing its will, from making itself known. And so this creates what I call the grandiosity gap. The gap between the self-concept, self-image, self-esteem, and sense of self-worth, which are often bloated and inflated and crazy and inane and detached from reality. So the gap between this self-concept, which is fantastic, and reality itself. Reality informs the narcissist. Well, the way you see yourself, the way you believe yourself to be is nonsensical. It's not true. It's wrong. Reality keeps sending messages and messengers onto the narcissist to inform the narcissist that everything he thinks he knows about himself, everything he believes to be true, everything he is fully convinced is factual, is actually all wrong. And this is a very injurious message. It's a very dissonant message. It renders reality a constant state of ambient narcissistic injury. The narcissist is constantly narcissistically injured by the mere existence of reality. Reality doesn't have to do anything. It just has to be there. And every time the narcissist gets in touch with the rough edges of reality, with the contours of reality, with the fabric and texture of reality, every time this happens, the narcissist is narcissistically injured. And these injuries accumulate. They fester. They're inside the narcissist, and they're like seeds. They grow. And so they take over the narcissist, and they lead to frustration. And frustration, as we know from Dallard's work in 1939, frustration leads to aggression. So this is the sequence. A grandiose fantasy, cognitive distortion, pushback by reality, intrusion, frustration, narcissistic injury, rage, frustration, aggression. But frustration and aggression are not point-like events in the narcissist life. They are the clinical features of narcissism. They permeate the entire narcissistic space. They characterize pathological narcissism. And this is what is known as narcissistic abuse. The narcissist abuses people because people are real, because they are figments of reality, not of his fantasy. Because people keep reminding him of his real station in life, his real location, his real standing, his real wealth or lack thereof, his real education, real or imagined lack of education. And so they keep reminding him that he is essentially an actor in the best case, or a clown in the worst case, that he's pathetic, that is incredible, not in the good sense, but in the bad sense, incredible, not to be believed. This constant messaging render the narcissist highly aggressive, sometimes violent, but always verbally abusive, and put all of these together and you get narcissistic abuse. And sometimes when this delusional fantasy dome, this paracosm, when they crumble, especially if this happens abruptly because of some event, some occurrence, some disaster, some criticism, some public humiliation and shaming, some exposure, when there is an abrupt or sudden change from delusional fantasy to unmitigated, unrefined, unfine-tuned reality, at that point the narcissist loses all his or her defenses. This is known as decompensation, and the result is narcissistic mortification and a borderline state, a borderline-like state of emotion dysregulation, self-destructiveness, which can culminate in self-harm and suicidal ideation or even suicide. So it is this battle between reality and fantasy that is the core feature by far of the narcissist. Everything else stems from it. If you renounce reality, you renounce everyone else in reality. You renounce the externality and separateness of other people because they're not real. Why are they not real? Because you reject reality as an organizing principle. You reject reality as an explanatory, interpretative principle, hermeneutic principle. You reject reality because it's real, and you are not real. You have chosen as a narcissist to not be real. You're embedded and immersed in an all-consuming, all-pervasive fantasy. And everyone else around you keeps reminding you that it's a fantasy, that your false self is false, that your grandiosity is laughable. And so this derision, this mockery, this criticism and disagreement, this rejection and shunning and avoidance by people, this hatred of the narcissist and the fact that he is obnoxious to others, all these gang up on the narcissist. And so he rejects reality and people in it because they're real. And obviously the outcome is that he is incapable of empathy. Because how can you empathize with non-existent entities? If people are not real, one cannot empathize with them. So you see that even a very important feature of narcissism, the lack of affective empathy, is a derivative of the narcissist's reluctance, inability, vehement rejection and renouncing of reality. It is this choice, this extended, rabid fantasy defense. This is a clinical feature from which one can derive all the other clinical features of pathological narcissism. First and foremost, as a child, in early childhood, as an infant, as a toddler, the narcissist to be has rejected reality, has rejected his mother, has rejected the world, and has rejected, first and foremost, himself, his or her true self, and has become a falsity, a falsehood, has become a story, a movie, a script. The false self is a narrative, and the narcissist chooses to transition from a real three-dimensional object to a symbolic entity, to a story, to a narrative, to a piece of fiction. The narcissist fictionalizes himself or herself as a child and continues throughout life as a piece of fiction. And as a piece of fiction, the narcissist has no place in reality, and reality has no place in the narcissist. And yet, the narcissist is furious when he is rejected or she is rejected by reality. And this is the paradox in narcissism. And this is the dissonance that I started with at the beginning of the video. This constant messaging of be yourself on condition that you are never yourself. Be yourself fully to the maximum on condition that you're inhibited and limited and boundaried. And these two messages can go together. And in pathological narcissism, we see the culmination of this conflict, of this dissonance, of this contradiction, of these two mutually exclusive propositions.